What if the strongest person in the room is not the one who feels no fear? What if true mental strength has nothing to do with confidence, motivation, or controlling everything around you? More than 3 centuries ago, a Japanese swordsman named Miyamoto Musashi wrote about a different kind of strength. A strength that comes from seeing reality clearly. Musashi fought more than 60 recorded duels and became one of Japan's most famous swordsmen. But near the end of his life, he wrote the Book of 5 Rings, a work that was not simply about fighting. It was about perception, timing, discipline, and the ability to remain steady when everything around you becomes uncertain. And that may be exactly what modern life has forgotten. Because today, we are surrounded by distractions, opinions, competition, notifications, and endless pressure to react. Musashi's answer was surprisingly simple. Do not allow the chaos outside you to create chaos inside you. But understanding what he meant requires going much deeper. The mind that cannot be easily shaken. Imagine standing across from an opponent who is trying to intimidate you. Your heart is racing. Your body is tense. Your mind is predicting everything that could go wrong. In that moment, the biggest threat may not be the person standing in front of you. It may be your own mind. Musashi understood this better than most. Born in Japan in the 17th century, he devoted much of his life to the study of swordsmanship. His experiences eventually led him to develop a philosophy centered on mastery, observation, adaptability, and disciplined action. Late in his life, he withdrew to Ryagando cave and wrote the Book of 5 Rings. The book became famous for its teachings on strategy, but beneath the strategies was something even more valuable. A method for dealing with uncertainty. Musashi did not promise a life without difficulty. He taught something more realistic. Become the kind of person who can remain effective when difficulty arrives. That distinction changes everything. Because mental strength is not the absence of pressure. It is the ability to think clearly while under pressure. And Musashi left behind several principles that can help us build exactly that. 1. Do not become attached to one way of doing things. One of Musashi's most important ideas was the importance of flexibility. He studied different techniques and developed his own approach to swordsmanship, including the use of 2 swords. But his philosophy was never simply, use this technique every time. Why? Because reality changes. The opponent changes. The environment changes. The distance changes. The timing changes. And the person who becomes obsessed with one method eventually becomes predictable. Musashi emphasized adapting to circumstances rather than becoming trapped by rigid rules. This principle is incredibly relevant today. Think about how often we create a mental script for how life is supposed to work. I should already be successful. This relationship should have worked. My career should be moving faster. I should know exactly what I'm doing. And when reality refuses to follow the script, we suffer twice. First because of the problem itself. Then because we resist the fact that the problem exists. Musashi's philosophy suggests another approach. Stop asking, why isn't reality following my plan? Start asking, given reality as it is, what is the best move now? That is adaptability. And adaptability is one of the foundations of mental strength. You do not need to control every situation. You need to become capable of responding to different situations without losing yourself. And once you understand that, another Musashi principle becomes much more important. 2. See what is really happening. Musashi repeatedly emphasized perception. Not simply looking. Seeing. There is a difference. You can look directly at a situation and still misunderstand it completely. Fear can distort perception. Ego can distort perception. Anger can distort perception. Desire can distort perception. And sometimes, the story you tell yourself becomes more powerful than the facts in front of you. Imagine someone does not respond to your message. You immediately think, "They're ignoring me. They don't respect me. I must have done something wrong." But none of those thoughts are facts. They are interpretations. The same thing happens in work. You receive criticism, and your mind translates it into rejection. You experience failure, and your mind translates it into identity. You lose an opportunity, and your mind declares that you are falling behind. Musashi's approach begins by separating observation from interpretation. What is actually happening? What do I know? What am I assuming? What am I allowing emotion to add to the situation? This is a powerful form of mental discipline. Because when you see reality more clearly, you stop fighting imaginary battles. And that leads to a deeper lesson. Sometimes the mind does not need more information. It needs less noise. 3. Train until action becomes natural. Musashi did not believe mastery came from thinking about mastery. It came from practice. Again and again. The swordsman trained until technique became deeply familiar. This matters because under pressure, we rarely perform according to our intentions. We perform according to our training. When things become difficult, the habits you have built become visible. If you only work when you feel motivated, pressure will expose that weakness. If you have trained yourself to act despite discomfort, pressure becomes easier to handle. This is why discipline is not about forcing yourself to become a different person overnight. It is about repeated practice. You want to become calmer. Practice pausing before reacting. You want to become more focused. Practice doing one thing without constantly switching attention. You want to become more disciplined. Practice keeping small promises to yourself. You want to become mentally stronger. Train your response to difficulty before the biggest difficulty arrives. Musashi understood that mastery is built through repetition. The goal is not to perform perfectly once. The goal is to make effective behavior increasingly natural. And that creates a profound shift. You stop depending on motivation. You begin depending on preparation. 4. Do not let emotion become your master. Musashi's philosophy was not about becoming emotionless. That would be impossible. Fear exists. Anger exists. Excitement exists. Desire exists. The question is whether those emotions control your actions. In a confrontation, panic can make you move too early. Anger can make you reckless. Overconfidence can make you careless. Fear can make you freeze. The same thing happens outside combat. Someone insults you, and you immediately respond. Someone succeeds, and jealousy changes how you see them. Someone criticizes you, and you spend the entire day replaying the conversation. An emotion appears. Then, without noticing it, you surrender your behavior to that emotion. Mental strength begins when there is a space between feeling and action. You can feel anger without becoming aggressive. You can feel fear without running. You can feel uncertainty without making an impulsive decision. That space is where self-control lives. And it can be trained. The next time something triggers you, do something remarkably simple. Do not respond immediately. Observe the reaction. Feel it. Then ask, what action serves me best here? That question can prevent hundreds of unnecessary mistakes. Because sometimes strength is not doing more. Sometimes strength is refusing to react. 5. Understand timing. Musashi placed enormous importance on timing. A technically perfect action performed at the wrong moment can still fail. This idea extends far beyond swordsmanship. There is a right moment to speak. A right moment to remain silent. A right moment to move forward. And a right moment to wait. Modern culture often tells us that speed is everything. Respond immediately. Move immediately. Decide immediately. Produce more. Consume more. Achieve more. But speed without timing can become self-sabotage. Think about an argument. You may have a valid point. But if you deliver it while the other person is angry, your correctness may accomplish nothing. Think about a career decision. You may want to quit immediately because you are frustrated. But perhaps the wiser move is to pause, gather information, and prepare your next step. Timing does not mean hesitation. It means understanding that action has context. Musashi's lesson is subtle. Do not confuse movement with progress. Sometimes the strongest move is the one you make at precisely the right moment. And to recognize that moment, you need another quality. Attention. 6. Become difficult to disturb. One of Musashi's deepest ideas concerns maintaining a stable mind. The world around you can become chaotic. But your internal state does not have to mirror it. Imagine a person who receives one bad email and spends the next 6 hours emotionally consumed by it. Their entire day has been captured by a few sentences on a screen. Now imagine someone else receives the same email. They read it. They evaluate it. They decide what needs to be done. And then they continue with their day. The external event is almost identical. The difference is internal stability. This does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming less easily hijacked. Musashi wrote about the importance of maintaining a mind that does not become fixed or disturbed by circumstances. That is a powerful concept for modern life. Your phone can demand your attention. Social media can provoke envy. News can trigger fear. Other people's opinions can create insecurity. But none of these things automatically deserve control over your inner world. You can notice something without surrendering your attention to it. That is strength. And the more you practice it, the harder you become to manipulate. 7. Stop chasing the appearance of mastery. There is another lesson hidden inside Musashi's life. He was not interested merely in appearing skilled. He pursued actual competence. That distinction matters. Today, it is easy to confuse consuming information with developing ability. You can watch hundreds of productivity videos without becoming productive. You can read about discipline without becoming disciplined. You can collect quotes about courage without becoming courageous. Knowledge is useful. But knowledge that never becomes behavior remains incomplete. Musashi's philosophy points toward practice. If you want to become better at something, engage with the thing itself. If you want to write, write. If you want to become physically capable, train. If you want to become calm, practice calmness under small pressures. If you want better judgment, make decisions, study their consequences, and learn. Do not become addicted to the feeling of preparation. At some point, you must step onto the field. Because the real test of understanding is not whether you can explain an idea. It is whether the idea changes how you behave. 8. Study the whole, not just the technique. One of Musashi's most important principles was the idea that a serious practitioner should understand more than a narrow set of techniques. He explored strategy as a broader way of thinking. This means mental strength cannot be built from one trick. You cannot simply memorize a few motivational phrases and expect your mind to become resilient. You need to understand yourself, your habits, your weaknesses, your patterns, your environment, your attention, your reactions, and the consequences of your choices. Think of your life as a system. If you constantly sleep poorly, consume endless distractions, avoid difficult tasks, and react emotionally to every inconvenience, then no inspirational quote will completely solve the problem. The foundation matters. Musashi's approach was holistic. Mastery comes from understanding how the parts work together. So instead of asking, "What is the one trick that will make me mentally strong?" ask, "What kind of daily life produces a strong mind?" That question is far more difficult. But it is also far more useful. 9. Accept that difficulty is part of the path. Perhaps the most important lesson is one modern culture often tries to hide. Difficulty is not a sign that something has gone wrong. Difficulty is part of becoming capable. Musashi's life was not built around comfort. His philosophy emerged from a world in which physical danger, uncertainty, and competition were real. He did not build his worldview around avoiding every unpleasant experience. He built it around becoming capable of meeting reality. That distinction is essential. If you constantly organize your life around avoiding discomfort, your world becomes smaller. You avoid difficult conversations. You avoid unfamiliar situations. You avoid failure. You avoid uncertainty. And eventually, you become highly skilled at avoidance. But when you deliberately face manageable difficulty, something changes. You discover that discomfort is survivable. Failure is survivable. Uncertainty is survivable. And every time you move through something difficult without abandoning your principles, your confidence becomes more grounded. Not confidence that says, "Nothing bad will happen." But confidence that says, "If something happens, I will deal with it." That is much stronger. The secret is not becoming unbreakable. And now we reach the deepest lesson. Musashi's secret to mental strength was not becoming a person who could never be shaken. It was learning how to return. Return to awareness. Return to discipline. Return to reality. Return to the present moment. Return to the next action. This is what makes his philosophy so powerful centuries later. Because life will always contain things you cannot control. People will misunderstand you. Plans will fail. Opportunities will disappear. Your body will become tired. Your confidence will fluctuate. You will make mistakes. There will be days when your mind feels clear. And there will be days when it does not. Mental strength is not pretending those days do not exist. It is refusing to let temporary conditions define your direction. Musashi understood something fundamental about mastery. You do not become powerful by controlling everything around you. You become powerful by becoming less dependent on circumstances for your ability to act. That is the difference between fragile confidence and real resilience. Fragile confidence says, "I can handle this because everything is going well." Mental strength says, "Even if things stop going well, I can still think. I can still observe. I can still choose." That is a completely different kind of power. And perhaps this is why Musashi's teachings remain relevant. He was not really teaching us how to win fights. He was teaching us how to meet reality without losing ourselves. The ancient secret hidden in Musashi's teachings is surprisingly simple. See clearly. Adapt when circumstances change. Train instead of merely wishing. Do not become a servant to your emotions. Respect timing. Protect your attention. Practice what you claim to understand. And accept difficulty as part of the path. But above all, remember this. You do not need a life without chaos to have a calm mind. You need a mind that can remain steady inside the chaos. The next time something goes wrong, notice what happens. Before reacting, pause. Before judging, observe. Before giving up, ask what the situation is teaching you. And before worrying about controlling the entire future, focus on the next move. That is where your power has always been. Not in controlling everything, but in choosing how you meet what comes. Musashi spent a lifetime refining that ability. And perhaps the real lesson is that mental strength is not something you suddenly discover. It is something you practice, one decision at a time. If this idea gave you a new way to see strength, take a moment to reflect on it. And if you found value in this video, consider liking it, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing for more timeless lessons on discipline, philosophy, and the human mind.